Let's talk about the Stanley Cup Finals. It's going on right now, actually. As far as I know, the first period is just coming to a close between the Montreal Canadiens and the Tampa Bay Lightning down in Florida. There is no score in Game 2. Game 1, however, was a significantly different story for all 60 minutes. It was an emphatic 5-1 Tampa Bay victory in Game 1. Colin, I want to get your thoughts here first, because that was a really tough first game for the Canadiens against a Tampa Bay team that was good last year, is good this year, and might be good for a while to come.
They're not going anywhere anytime soon. The Tampa Bay Lightning are the equivalent of the evil empire as far as the NHL is concerned. And Game 1, they came out and proved it. 5-1, it was a absolute rout. Anyone who tells you that game was close is kidding themselves. Transition, the Lightning outclassed the Canadiens. I mean, early in that game, you saw that the Canadiens kept turning over the puck. They kept making mental mistakes that, for all intents and purposes, their goaltender, Carey Price, has helped them really hide throughout this playoff run. I mean, those first 2 games against Toronto in the first round, the Canadiens made the same mistakes. It was just sloppy passing, sloppy shooting, nothing going right. And Carey Price really picked them up in that first series. And they've been a great story. Like I said, this is a David and Goliath matchup. I'm rooting for the Canadiens to win this series, but it's not plausible. Round 2, they run by Winnipeg, and then round 3, they have a really great battle with the Golden Knights. So everyone's feeling good, and then you just come up against this giant in the Tampa Bay Lightning who are stacked up and down. Victor Hedman, Nikita Kucherov, who, by the way, has 30 points in his last 19 playoff games. 2 goals in Game 1. He's doing it hurt. He is out there like a Greek god playing this sport, and he refuses to accept the injury. They asked him after the game, how's the injury doing? How were you able to get through it? Didn't even want to acknowledge it. This guy's focused on winning the Stanley Cup for a second year in a row, and it's really incredible to watch. In terms of what actually happened during the game, the story has to be that first line for Montreal. It was Nick Suzuki, Tyler Toffoli, Cole Caulfield. They just completely dropped the puck, figuratively speaking, in this game. ±9, -9. 3 goals allowed on their watch. That can't happen if you're going to compete with Tampa. For those saying that they need to play more physically, I'm not sure that's possible. The hits were 58-57, which was a record in the playoffs for both teams. It doesn't get much more physical than that in today's NHL. Montreal's only hope is that Carey Price steals the game, which he's fully capable of doing. He's obviously a great goaltender. But in order to do so, he's going to have to outduel Andrei Vasilevsky, who right now is the best goaltender in the NHL, no doubt about that. And interestingly enough, Price has struggled against Tampa Bay. His last 7 playoff games, he's 2-5, which is not so hot. So right now, it's looking like this is going to be a rout in favor of Tampa Bay. They just have too many weapons, and it's going to be hard for Montreal to compete with them going forward. And if you want to read the statistics, teams that won Game 1 have gone on to win the Cup 75% of the time. So if you believe in history repeating itself, you could be looking at a Tampa Bay championship for a second straight year.
To Colin's points about, this series so far, and this Lightning team is just so good and so prepared for the long haul. And by long haul, I don't mean a long season. I mean a long half decade of winning. So that's really what they're prepared for, and they have been preparing for this for a very long time. Anyone who's been following hockey knows that this is a team that has built itself very strategically, really for 5 years before they were truly competing, and that's why they're able to be so good right now. But also, here's the thing. They're so good that the argument for Montreal to be more physical, to try and beat them, is a ludicrous argument. As Colin mentioned, hits are just about the same between these two teams. At least they were in that first game. But also, the Lightning are like very few. Well, I'm not prepared to call them a dynasty yet, but very few teams that have the potential to win a lot. You look at the Devils of the early 2000s and actually Canadiens teams of past decades. They're teams that are able to adjust to whatever game you play. And whatever game they play, obviously they're the best at it. But what makes them so good is that they can be the best at whatever type of game that they play. And that's why they're able to beat almost any opponent. So that's a big part of this. Another huge aspect of this that I think is super important is you look at the way the NHL was played this year. Obviously, you don't play outside of your division until the Stanley Cup semifinals if you win your conference, excuse me. So I think you look at the difference between most of the conferences and the All Canadian Conference this year, and it is night and day. The Canadian Conference this year was really just I would say a 2.5 horse race, but it was really just the Leafs and the Canadiens fighting for most of the regular season. And then the Lightning had pretty stiff competition in their division. So I think that is how this Lightning team proved themselves as a tried and true team, even this year after winning the title last year. So to me, that's a huge aspect of this. But Colin, I'll come back to you again. Here we are. It's game 2. Second period's about to start. Again, it's going to be a power play for the Canadiens to start things out. But nevertheless, no score. Lightning with a 1-0 lead. How do you see the rest of the series going? Do the Canadiens have a chance of even competing in this series?
I think they could steal a game. I think they could push it to 5. And I think plausibly, if Carey Price plays out of his mind, you might get 6. There's no way that this series goes 7 games. The Lightning are just too smart. And that was indicative in game 1. I mean, right out of the gate, Cole Caulfield, young kid, makes a pass in the neutral zone right to Braden Point, intercepts the pass, gives it to Chernock, easy goal, which had to be deflating for the Canadiens because if you watch the goal, it was a cheap goal. Like there's good goals and cheap goals in hockey. There's the ones that kind of just make you, groan after the fact. This was one of those goals where it just kind of tipped in and right off the bat, the momentum was going in the Lightning's favor. And I don't see that changing. The only way that Montreal competes is if Carey Price somehow reverses fate here and manages to play better than 2-5 against the Lightning because Vasilevsky is just as good, if not better. I mean, I think Vasilevsky's better than Carey Price at this point in his career. So, yeah, my pick is Lightning in 5. The only way it goes 6 is if Carey Price really steps it up.
It's really hard for a fan of any team in the former Eastern Conference to root for the Tampa Bay Lightning and that's just a testament to how good they were because they beat up against every single team. That's how dominant they've been really, we'll say in the last 2.5 seasons. So that's a huge aspect here. But, nevertheless, this is a Lightning team that is just too good and I actually like how Colin put it, too smart to allow this series to go 7 games. It's just not going to happen. And it's not that this Canadiens team is bad. It's just they're up against an opponent that you're not going to be able to win against. It's just, every team has their expiration date, the farthest they could possibly go. I would argue the Canadiens actually exceeded expectations this season by getting to the Stanley Cup final. But nevertheless, and as much as I'm rooting for Montreal here, as really the underdog by a really wide margin, it's really tough to not see the Lightning maybe even sweep this series. Perhaps I'm going too far to say that, after only seeing one game and being scoreless almost halfway through game 2. But it's definitely a possibility. And, while we talk about this, the way I want to wrap up the segment is, Colin, we'll start with you here. This Lightning team is really good. And like we've been talking about this whole segment, they don't look like they're going anywhere. So just from our knowledge, not only really of hockey, but our knowledge of sports dynasties and teams that are able to win for an extended period of time. I won't bowl your opinions, but I'll go to Colin first here. How long do you think this Lightning team is sustainable in terms of maybe not necessarily winning the final every year, but competing for that Stanley Cup every season?
I think this could plausibly go 5 to 7 years in terms of how long they're in the playoffs and competing on a yearly basis. And really that revolves around Vasilevsky's ability to stay healthy and continue to make saves in net. Because, it kind of reminds me of the Rangers of the early 2010s where they might not have always had the best talent, but Lundqvist was good enough to push them to the first or second round of the playoffs. So even if age gets to the Lightning in one aspect or another, I mean, I know Stamkos is getting older, obviously. I mean, Ryan McDonough is on the Lightning. I mean, it's funny that he's a footnote on that team when he used to be the captain of the Rangers. So even if age gets to this team, they're going to be around as long as they have Vasilevsky in net because he is just that good. And I think anytime you have a goaltender like that, it's kind of like having a great quarterback. You will stick around for as long as you can, and you will compete on some level. You know that doesn't mean they'll win every year, but you're going to be in at least the first, second round every year. And then on that odd year, you might go out and make a trade, get a good free agent. You're right back in the final.